Okay. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you for coming. The good news is we think we're going to be back at the Arboretum next month, so this might be the last time we do this. Don't know of any other announcements that we have. You might want to check out the Native Plant Society's website. There's a photo contest happening, and most everything else that I can think of are happening later in the fall. Van, do you want to talk about the plant of the month?
Okay. Let's see. Am I on?
I hear you.
Okay. The plant of the month this year is Flutia odorata, or sweet scent or salt marsh fleabane. In the past, this plant has been available at our Wildscapes Workshop plant sale and may be available at this year's plant sale, which is going to be in late September. So look for it on the plant list. The information about this plant has been displayed in a running loop up to now. And this is also will be available on our website. And the web page is given in the chat. So you can look up all the features of it, the moth that it is host to, etc. On the website at your leisure. Our other plants of the month are also on that page. Some of them, the older ones, have extremely large files and it'll take a long time to download. We're about ready to change that. So you can look at all the other plants of the month. Okay. That's it for the plant of the month, and I will introduce our speakers tonight. If nobody else has anything, no one else has another announcement?
I don't think so. Other
okay.
Than we're planning Wildscapes. Yeah.
Could I make an announcement?
Yes.
All right. I'm just trying to get the. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So I am the VP Education of the state, and we have a number of students who are looking for support. I know that the board meeting is later in the month, but I was wondering if the Houston chapter had any interest in supporting some of the students. See, we have one who is doing a orchid bee interaction at the Houston Arboretum, and she's looking to buy a camera, and she's developed the citizen science participatory element to her project. Another one is doing a project dealing with grasses in the Nash Prairie. Those were two in particular I thought the Houston chapter might be interested in. And then finally, we have a student who lives in Katy, and she is looking for a scholarship. So two of them were research grants, and then one was a scholarship. And those are the three that are particularly relevant to Houston. And if you're interested in it, I could show you, I could send information about the students and let people know whether they, about the students, and they can decide whether they want to offer any support. So.
Hey, thank you. Actually, for our members and viewers tonight, that is some of the uses where we are using our money that we fundraise from our Wildscapes workshop. So be on the lookout for the Wildscapes workshop coming September. So are you finished with your announcement?
Yeah, I just wanted to let people know that
I think
we are doing the fundraising, and these are 3 projects that are relevant to Houston. So
yeah, I think that's great because that gives everybody a chance to see where our some of the funds are going. I mean, this is not the only place, but where some of the funds are going that they're helping.
Right.
Okay, let me introduce our speakers for tonight. Our speakers tonight are Dr. John and Kendra Abbott, and they will be talking about their new book, Common Insects of Texas and Surrounding States. With this book, the Abbotts have created the state's most comprehensive field guide to help readers recognize and understand these fascinating creatures. Containing about 1,300 species and more than 2,700 photographs, this guide offers a wealth of information about the characteristics and behaviors of Texas insects. Now, please help support the Houston chapter of NIPSOT and wait until our September Wildscape workshop to buy this book, and it will be available for sale at our Wildscape workshop in September. For people, if you're able to pick up the book at the plant sale pickup, if you're from the Houston area, please wait until the Wildscape workshop to buy the book, but be sure to buy the book. And more information is forthcoming about the Wildscape workshop. Okay, as I previously said, our presenters tonight are John and Kendra Abbott, professional nature photographers, educators, and outdoor enthusiasts based in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. John has focused on dragonflies and damselflies throughout much of his career and has written 3 books on these beautiful subjects that contain much of their photography. And John is currently the chief curator and director of research and collections at the University of Alabama. Kendra is an ecologist and focused on endangered species and conservation issues much of her career. She is the research and outreach coordinator for the Alabama Museum of Natural History. Among the many projects John and Kendra are currently working on, they are revising the Peterson Field Guide to Insects of North America and writing a field guide to the Common Insects of Texas. They have had the opportunity to travel extensively throughout Latin America, Africa, and other parts of the world where they enjoy taking photos of pretty much everything in the natural world. They feel lucky enough to be able to teach and excite others about the amazing biodiversity they have been able to observe through their travels and photography together. So let me let John and Kendra speak. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Lan, and thanks for that nice introduction. And thanks so much for the invitation to speak to this group. We look forward to sharing with you, kind of the process of how we developed this book. First off, some of you may be wondering with that introduction, why are a couple of Alabamians writing a book on Texas insects? And the easy answer to that is up until about 5 years ago, we were Texans too. We spent most of our life in Texas, actually, certainly at least me and Kendra in the last many years. And so it was a new job that took us out of state, although we love coming back all the time. And
we look forward to moving back to Texas one day.
Yeah, for sure. So let me see if I can share my screen here. That's what we want to do.
I think everybody's seeing the chat.
Does everybody see no, I think you're seeing it's the wrong screen. Aren't you seeing the notes?
Yeah, you're seeing the wrong screen.
Okay.
Wait.
Well. Stop share. Is that the wrong screen? Were you seeing the notes instead of the?
I was seeing the big picture, and then on the side, the column of slides.
Okay, so I gotta.
Is that better?
Well, no, I haven't shared the screen. Right, so sorry, you think we've done this enough. We think that's the one I did earlier.
That's the one. Is that better?
Is it still the same thing?
Yeah, it's what okay. I did earlier. So sorry, just a quick second here while we get this straightened out.
Oops, sure.
That looks right to me. Oh, now the notes are there again.
Yeah, it keeps wanting to share the wrong screen for some reason. I've not had this problem before.
It's still not right?
Oh, that's what I'm seeing. Let's see. So let me do it this way. No, I want to see that, and that.
There we go.
I think we're good now.
Thank you.
I had a little assistance there. I was trying to share a window instead of a desktop, I think was my issue. Yeah, thanks again so much for the invitation to speak with y'all and tell you a little bit about this neat book, which we're very proud of. It took a lot longer to get out than what we had hoped, but it is finally out, and hope that you find it useful. Many of the insects, of course, have that are in it have interactions with plants, and you are likely to see on the plants that you're have in your yard and such. So it's very appropriate for that. So what we thought we would do tonight is just kind of go through and tell you a little bit about our vision for the book, how it kind of came together, give you a preview of kind of what's inside the book, and some of the decisions that we made and some of the stories that, as we put it all together, it came about. And then we'll give you a little preview of the Peterson Field Guide to North American Insects as well, that Lan mentioned that we're working on.
And actually, if you guys are okay with it, we kind of enjoy seeing your comments along the way. And so if you have any questions as we're talking, just put them in the chat. And we've got the chat off to the left here, and we'll try and read the questions and answer them as we're going. So it's kind of a fun, more interactive way to do these Zoom talks. So
yeah, or unmute and holler out a question.
Yeah,
that's
sure.
Fine too.
We don't care.
So, whenever we tackle projects like this, we always kind of look around for what are some of the best, what we think anyway, are some of the best comparable resources. So in this case, we looked at to the field guides that we think are the best, regardless of what the topic was they covered, what the group was. And some of the ones that we, think about that we really use a lot and we like the layout of was, for example, the Kaufman Field Guide to North American Insects. It's a very popular guide. We really liked certain parts of the layout and such. And so we wanted to, use elements of that. We looked at some other books as well and pulled elements from there. But we also wanted to add our own creative style and hopefully basically improve on these things, on these other resources. So for example, with the Kaufman Guide, one of the things that was very attractive to us was that the insects are all basically extracted from the background. It makes it easier to kind of see characters and see more detail on the insects. But one thing that we don't like about the Kaufman Guide and the way that they did that is that they basically extract images from in situ photographs. Many of them are ours, in fact, in that guide. And back in the day, that was pretty much all they had to work with. I mean, I remember sending the Kaufman Guide lots of slides, 35 millimeter slides to work with. But when we set out to do this, what we decided to do is try to photograph as many of the insects in a white box to begin with. So on white to begin with. And what that does is it allowed us to create a lot more or to control a lot more of the detail of the lighting. And ultimately, we think come up with a better product in terms of the images. So you'll see some of these images that we've included in this book. So this is just a picture of our studio in Austin when we lived there, and what a white box that we use kind of looks like. This particular one has a background behind it, but you can take photos in that with just the white background. And that's how a lot of our insect photos were taken. So this is our battle station, if you will. We have dual desks so it's really convenient, allows us to easily talk with one another as we're trying to work on different parts of the book or other projects like this. And we spent many hours, in front of these computer screens, putting all of this together. We wanted to, try to make the most user-friendly guide we could. And so what we did was we basically looked at groups that would be recognizable to most anyone, no matter what level of entomological expertise you might have. And we color coded those. So whether you're looking at the table of contents or the index or the chapters throughout the book, they're going to be color coded based on these different groups here. And it's just meant for, easy access, basically a quick kind of visual index. And we provided silhouettes in addition to, of course, the text names for these different groups to make it easy to recognize. So we did include a small introduction. It's not by any means exhaustive, but it introduces a little bit about the taxonomy of insects, a little bit about, what an insect is in terms of morphology, things like that. We, again, didn't get exhaustive, in terms of detail here, but wanted to provide some general background, because to identify some of these things from photos, you need to know, some of the different terms. I also really wanted to talk about the diversity of insects in Texas. I felt, I pretty much grew up in Texas and always enjoyed my time there, still do when we get back, because it is so diverse. Of course, its large size, its geographic position make it, a state with top diversity in many different groups. And it's hard to say for sure, but I strongly feel that Texas probably has more insect species than any other state. Some people in maybe Arizona or California might, argue a little bit with that. It's hard to say because there aren't comprehensive lists for all of these states. But again, Texas has got its size, a mixing of eastern and western faunas, subtropical and temperate faunas, mean that we've got a lot of species there that just, all in one place that you just don't find elsewhere. Forest to desert and so on. So what I did was I tried to put together a table here on the right that basically shows every order, the number of species that are either known or guesstimated to be in Texas. Those with the asterisks by their name are more of a guess based on literature. It's not just my guess. It's based on literature and things like that. But, there's just some groups we don't have comprehensive lists for. And then, the number of species in North America and in the world. So you can kind of get, a comparison there. And as a general rule, North America has about 10% of the world fauna of any particular group. And, Texas, depending upon the group you're looking at, may have a third to even 50% of the species, which again, I think is an indication of just how diverse it is. So overall, I suspect we're looking at around 30,000 species of insects in Texas, which is that's a pretty respectable number. And it was fun putting this, assembling this data in this graph or this table. We also wanted to both Kendra and I put a heavy emphasis on conservation. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the endangered arthropods that are found in the state. So we've had privileged enough to photograph some of these over the years, and most of them are cave specific things that you're not going to run across aside from their rarity. It's just where they're found and such. But there are a few things, like there's the American burying beetle there, which is a pretty sexy large beetle that has been found in Texas historically, although not in recent years. I think it's perhaps been extirpated, but it may come back. It's right on the edge, certainly still found in Oklahoma. But anyway, we wanted to provide some information about some of the endangered arthropods in the state. So this is what the layout of the book looks like. This is a typical spread, and we're just indicating the different kind of sections that you would see. Again, the color coding going across the top, as well as these little tabs, colored tabs on each side, so that you can hold the book closed and quickly flip to a particular group if you know the color. We provided ranges, but not detailed specific ranges. These are basically, we broke the state up into I actually forget the exact number now, but a certain number of regions. And then if the insect is known from that region, that's what you see colored in there. So, you know, east, south, the panhandle, West Texas, central, that kind of thing. For so many of these, there just isn't data to, you know, to provide a detailed map at the level of, you know, within the state. And so that's why we chose to do it that way.
And one of the things that we were trying to figure out when we first started creating this guide is how many species do we put on each spread. And we actually gave the press a few options where we had just 8 species per spread, or I think we had like 10 or 15 per spread. And they actually decided to go with 8 per spread because they liked when we added a little bit about like host plants or things that they ate or where they were found. And that was probably that they said that it was something that they found that sold books better. And it's probably because of folks like yourself that that influenced their decision on us doing 8 species per spread.
Yeah, and I think it worked out well in terms of the imagery and being able to, you know, we always work hard to basically show off the critter through the photographs, make them as large as possible. Some other things you'll notice on here is a seasonality graph. So just basically letting you know whether this is something you would find in the spring, summer, fall, or winter. Both common and scientific names. We do have the scientific family name listed as well. And then, like Kendra said, some general information for each one, not only identification information, but also some biological information. Occasionally we have little call outs, like you can see here in the bottom right for that Katie did as well. And we'll point some of those out as we go through. We really worked hard, and this is actually a good plate to talk about this. First of all, hopefully you notice that the photos, are vivid and really detailed. And this again is because, these were all taken in a white box, not in situ, and then trying to remove the background. And the other thing is we really always tried to, again, maximize them. So that can be challenging on ones like this, where you've got these long antennae, and you don't want to make things distracting, but you also want to get things as large as possible. Some of the other field guides that we looked at, actually I find it quite common that the insect, whether it's on white or whether it's in situ, is oftentimes quite small within whatever window they're using. So we wanted to try to maximize that as much as possible. We
tried to get rid of as much white space as possible and filling it with the bug. So we thought we'd just take you through some of the chapters which correspond to different orders within the book, and just share with you some of the stories that kind of came along with creating them in some cases. You may or may not be familiar with Springtails. This is actually used to be an order of insects when I took entomology many years ago, but now is generally considered its own class, but they're closely related. And so it's traditional to include these groups in there with insects. And so we did. And, one thing I guess I would say about these groups is that when we started getting into a particular group that we weren't all that familiar with,
to begin with, just had maybe a superficial familiarity, we quickly got engaged and fascinated with them. I mean, it didn't matter what group it was. Some of these smaller, obscure groups oftentimes got us the most excited, I would say.
Yeah, in this group, Columbella, we realized near the end of finishing the book that we didn't have very many pictures of them. So we quickly, at our house in Alabama, actually started looking through the leaf litter and tried to find some Columbella in the leaf litter. And this is a group that if you're interested in describing new species or just discovering new species, you should get into these, because I think we had like 3 to 6 new species to science in our backyard. So when we were sending our photos off to experts, there was actually an expert in Tennessee, and a few of them he knew of, but they still weren't described. And some of them were just totally new to science. So it's a really cool, beautiful group. They're brightly colored, and they're kind of charismatic and have some really cool mating behaviors. Yeah, we really started appreciating Columbella during this book.
They're cute and I dare say almost have personalities, with each one. Are there any descriptions of their size? So one of the things that I saw that in the chat, I'll try to keep my eye on the chat when I see questions pop up. So one of the things that we borrowed, unabashedly, we acknowledge this, was from the Kaufman Guide, actually, again, and that's the size silhouettes that they use in that. So Ken Kaufman's, that series, what they do is they basically, and I don't think you can see my cursor on there, but they basically have a little silhouette that is, and everything on that page is relative to that. So in this case, they're super tiny, and that's why we have them underneath the magnifying glass. You'll see some other chapters as we go through a little bit larger, but basically the size on the page is, they're relative to one another, and then the silhouette is the actual size, is the idea.
Yeah. So Mary's asking if we got to name any of the new springtail species, and honestly, we realized that we curated them incorrectly. They have a very special way of being curated with some special, like on slides with some.
Well, they have to be I just throw stuff in alcohol, and these guys basically don't do well with that. You've got to put them in a special fluid first.
But
so
the other thing is that there's like, I don't know, just a handful of people that are working on them in the world. And so I think there's a backlog of species descriptions. So no, not yet, but we plan on getting better at preserving them, and then hopefully being able to send some specimens to the experts so that they can describe them.
Yeah, it's, if you're interested in species descriptions or describing species, it's the small stuff that where there's always opportunity, because most people don't want to deal with it. But I find it fascinating for sure. So the odonates, or the dragonflies, damselflies, of course, are near and dear to my heart. But one of the things that I should say, the entire project was heavily supervised throughout. This was our cat Copper, who was always making sure we're doing the right thing.
He was usually about 2 inches from the screen, yeah. So it made it difficult to edit.
But one of the things that I quickly discovered with odonates is, first of all, that there are certain groups that photographing in a white box works really well for, most groups, in fact, but there's certain groups that they don't. And butterflies are one, and dragonflies are one. They just don't look lifelike, and they just don't do well kind of in a captive situation like that. And also because most dragonflies and damselflies have, clear wings, at least to some extent. If you just extract the image from its background, you're going to see through the wings, right? And, you'll see whatever the background was there. So it does not make for a pleasing image at all. So we had to figure out how to overcome that. And what we did was we did extract most of these from the background. But then what I did was I had specimens of these, because I have a large collection of dragonflies, and I took images of the wings separate, and then I brought those into Photoshop, and I basically reshaped the photographed wings to look the same size and shape as the wings when they were in situ. and then I got rid of the in situ version. And that's how we were able to create these where, you know, basically you can see through the wing without, you know, without that background being there.
And then occasionally some of the wings, when you photograph them, on white, you start to lose the venation. So we'd actually even have to bring them back into Photoshop and redraw some of the veins, which you could sometimes pull back in Photoshop. So Wallace is saying that he has used our Texas insect book to quickly identify a male southern flannel moth. Well, we're super happy that the book is useful. It tickles us when people think that it's useful. So thank you for making the comment.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a neat moth too. Now, caterpillar, maybe not quite so much fun, but the moth is great. Another group, one of these kind of somewhat obscure groups that you may or may not be familiar with, are bark lice and book lice, as well as the parasitic lice, true lice. They used to be separate orders. Now they're all put in the same group. The bark lice and book lice in particular, we, you know, found interesting, but really hadn't had a lot of experience with. But, you know, it turns out that there's 30 some odd families of these things in North America. And so for this other book project we were working on, we needed to really you know, try to get photos of every family. And so we connected up with Diane Young in Texas. And she's a retired chemist,
Yep.
But is, since a kid, was fascinated with these things and has pursued that passion throughout her life. And
she's retired now and she does it full time.
She's extraordinarily helpful with us, or to us, and helping to find these things and photograph them. And I venture to say we probably have more photos of live sosids now than most anyone, and certainly diversity wise, thanks in part to her. She
would call me and say, hey, I'm going to Palmetto State Park. Do you want to come? There's a ton of sosids there. So I would follow her around. And actually the picture in the previous slide of the webbing was taken at Palmetto State Park because she had called me and said, hey, let's go look for sosids. So
in the bottom left there, that certain species will basically conceal a tree in silk, and then they live underneath that silk in galleries.
Sue is asking about the dragonflies, and she's wondering if the small dragonflies are called darning needles.
So typically, one particular family are called darners, and that's the Eschnidae. Sometimes dragonflies as a whole would be called darning needles in some areas. There are a number of colloquial names that go along with them. But it's actually the bigger ones, not the smaller ones, that are usually referred to as darners or darning needles.
And the folklore is actually that when children slept, that the dragonfly would sew the children's mouth shut, and that's why the darning needle. That's where that kind of comes from, which is
another name for them is devil's darning needles. Because of that. Fleas was, you know, there's actually quite a number of flea species, but they're very species specific. And so most people aren't going to come across anything other than a cat flea, which is the flea that you typically also find on your dog. So we weren't trying to find fleas on squirrels or, you know, rodents and all these other different mammals for this book. But we were trying to find cat fleas, and, you know, both with cats and dogs in our house. When it came time, I wasn't happy with the images I had before, and I wanted to improve on them. And so I, you know, thought, oh, well, this would be an easy one to find. And like anything, you know, when you don't need it, it's everywhere. And when you do, we can't find it. And we called rescue groups and you know, friends and said, hey, any of your pets have fleas? None of ours had fleas.
Vets, everyone,
vets,
like,
and,
let us know. And some vets, like with lice, would call us and be like, hey, we've got some lice, come photograph it. But with fleas, most of them get treated right away. And by the time we would get them, they would be dead. And that was the same with rescue groups. Basically, they wouldn't let us get into contact with the animal for 2 days, and they would have treated it on day one. So the fleas were dead. So it was very difficult, oddly enough.
Yeah, long story short, one of the most common, insect pests anyway, we really had a hard time finding. But I basically was put in contact with a group that rears fleas for medical treatments and such. Like they use them as study subjects in California, and they were super nice. And before I knew it, I had 500 fleas on my desk, and a tiny little bottle, and as well as a bunch of larvae. And so I had all the fleas I could possibly deal with. In fact, more. If you've ever tried to get one flea out of 500 out of a small little tube, that's a challenge. But anyway, we ended up getting the pictures, and
then a week later, there were some stray cats in our yard
that had fleas.
So whatever.
It happens. Another group that we had always enjoyed, but realized there was some taxonomic needs in Texas are the walking sticks. Texas has a tremendously diverse walking stick population or species. We've included, here a few easily recognizable eggs down there. Walking stick eggs are really cool. But and Kendra in particular became very enamored with walking sticks.
And Big Bend is basically the epicenter of walking stick diversity. We have most of the species of walking sticks in Texas, and most of them are in sort of the Big Bend area.
Yeah, and one of the things, there's a particular group, I'll actually jump back here, that is the genus Diaphragmera. We just show one on this page because they basically all look alike. But one of the things we've always struggled with was identifying them, and there's multiple species in Texas. So we wanted to try to provide the right resources to identify them to species. And so we, include here males and females, the tips of the abdomen, because it's the relative size of those terminal segments, and the cerci, those appendages that are coming off the abdomen that help you to identify what species you have. And torquata is a species that's found out in Big Bend. It's super common as a male, but very difficult to find as a female. In fact, we combed we couldn't find them ourselves, associate them, and we found we contacted all sorts of collections, and nobody had any females. And I do wonder if there's not some taxonomic issues here. And so one of the things we're looking at is doing some molecular phylogenetics on this particular genus, because I think there's, I think the species as they're currently known are in need of
when we would take pictures of these guys, we would keep them alive in cages and stuff. And I had two separate species in cages that I thought that basically don't even overlap in species range, or maybe they do actually. I can't remember which species they were right now, but then one morning I woke up and they were mating, and they had viable offspring. They had eggs, and those eggs, because I saw them mating, I was like, well, I'm going to see if those eggs hatch, and they did. So I suspect, and reading some of the papers, you even actually see that species in different genera even mating with, getting confused and mating with other species in a completely different genera. So there's a lot of work to be done. And in fact, if you look on iNaturalist or you use it, I would say about 99% of the species identifications are incorrect on iNaturalist.
For walking
for Diaphragmera, yeah.
Mantids, another really fun group, and another group that we included the Ootheca, or the egg cases, because they are recognizable. You can see there, those are most of the species found in Texas, just the eggs, and you can just glancing at them, tell differences between them. So we worked hard to make sure and include those. This is just what a plate in the mantid chapter looks like. Some of them are super thin, and others quite bulky. The true bugs, if you don't know, all bugs are insects, but not all insects are bugs. Bugs are a particular order of insects, technically speaking, the order Hemiptera, with a half leathery, half membranous forewing, and you can see that up there, you know, in the beginning. And these are things like, you know, everything from cicadas and tree hoppers to stink bugs and assassin bugs and things like that that you may be familiar with. We tried to show variation where we can. So in this particular page, you'll see there's 5 individuals of the same species, that oak tree hopper, but we wanted to show the variation in color and in basically horn or no horn. And so that's why you see all those there, because it'd be really easy to realize to think those are different species, but that's in fact all the same species.
And this is actually a great spread to talk about, like, you know, on the left, you see that there's several common name of tree hopper, but the genus and species are different. And that was just a relic of that there weren't any common names for those species. And the name that was generally used was just tree hopper for them. So, so if you see replicates like that, it's not an error. It's just, that's what they're called. That's a common name for them.
Yeah, and one of the things that it occurs to me I didn't mention earlier, one way that we tried to pick which species we included in here was to look at sources like iNaturalist and Bug Guide. And, you know, I was able to pull data from those and determine which taxa, which species were most commonly submitted. Therefore, you know, the assumption is most commonly encountered. And so we tried to use that as a guide, as well as just our own kind of experience with what was common and not common, and what we were able to get photos for. All of the photos in this book, except for I think about a half a dozen, are ones that we took. One of my favorite groups are the Neuroptera. This is a collective group of things called lacewings and antlions and owl flies and such like that. And they're just really cool group. That's a mantis fly up there at the top with the general morphology. And they're just, I don't know, there's just something neat about them. So really enjoyed working on these and putting them together. This is one plate. Here's another plate of these. There's probably one of the reasons I probably like them is a superficial resemblance to dragonflies and damselflies. We did try to include larvae here and there too, where they were identifiable, like they would be recognizable and identifiable. You'll see larvae associated with the adult imagery in here. And sometimes, like this spongilla fly is really tiny up in the top left. Everything else is quite a bit bigger. So sometimes we had to put 2 different size silhouettes on a page in order to really make that come up, you know, get the sizes clear across all the different species there. I also really like the scorpion flies. There's 2 major groups in Texas, the hanging ones and the common scorpion flies. Some of you may be familiar with that really cool large one at the top there. It's found in the fall with those really vibrant orange and black wings and red body. It's a neat group. And then the hanging scorpion flies look a lot like crane flies, but they have 4 wings, whereas crane flies have 2. And these guys will always be hanging. In fact, their tarsi are so long they can't walk. They can't walk on a substrate.
But they also have that big kind of nose hanging down, the big, yeah.
Yeah, they have
really cool.
a prolonged proboscis there. Basically, it's part of the mouth parts that just are extended there, make them pretty distinctive. And this group does all sorts of neat things. The males will often capture prey and present them to the females to basically do 2 things. One, provide some nutrients for the offspring, but also sometimes just to occupy her while they're mating. So beetles are another really diverse group that it's in fact the most diverse group, arguably, of insects. And we have a lot of them in Texas. Here's just a couple of plates to give you an idea of some of the diversity that you can see in the state. Flies are, lots of things are called flies, dragonflies, butterflies, but there's the true flies, which are in the order Diptera. And what Diptera really means is two wings. And it's because, unlike most insects, basically there's only two visible wings, not two pair, but two wings. And that's how you can separate them. The photo on the left here, you can readily see that. You see two wings, and then the little white things with the knob on the end are actually the hind wings. They're just reduced to these structures called halteres.
So Shannon is curious how many species are represented in the book, and how did we decide which ones to include?
Yeah, so about 1,300 species, I think it is, in the book, which out of 30,000 doesn't sound like many, and it's not, but the book needs to be portable, and the project needed to be doable. And of course, out of those 30,000, most people are not going to encounter but a fraction. And then again, in terms of how we decided which ones, we again looked at Bug Guide and iNaturalist and ran some data analysis on those to see which species were most frequently reported on those sites, and then use that as a guide. It wasn't an absolute, but as a guide to putting these things in there. So here's just a spread of a bunch of cool flies. Some other, neat flies. Butterflies and moths are a group that are actually pretty well known in Texas, especially the moths compared to some of the other states. Thanks to a couple of workers that spent many, many years focusing on them. Actually, they're based out of the Houston area. And so, we try to include as many. This is a, favorite group. Often say butterflies are the gateway insect for many people. And so we wanted to try to include as many as we could. Sometimes we actually are including the ventral side of the wing as well as the dorsal side. And to do that, we sometimes are actually using specimens. So some of these call out boxes are actually specimen photos rather than living photos to show the other side of the wing. So just some other examples from that group. Some really pretty Saturniids. And again, examples showing the real variation that you can see in some of these groups that, at first glance would make you think you're looking at different species. And then the Hymenoptera are the wasps and the bees and ants, another diverse group. In fact, some people, mostly hymenopterologists, people that study them, would argue that they're the most diverse group of insects. It's just that most of them aren't described.
And the reason they believe that is because there's so many parasites that are species specific. So their argument is that there's species specific parasites to all these different other insect species, and so Hymenoptera would have to be more abundant than Coleoptera. Yeah,
and while I would really I love beetles. They'd probably be my second favorite group after odonates. While I like the idea of beetles being the most diverse, I can't argue with that logic, actually. So, in fact, here are a bunch of parasitic examples. They're often tiny. Here's some at the bottom that are emerging out of a caterpillar. There are lots of different, some of them make galls. So there are a lot of different species out there and really vary. Things you might be more familiar with, like the paper wasps and yellow jackets and things along those lines there. And then, in addition to the insects proper, we wanted to include some arachnids, spiders, and things like that, just because they're oftentimes closely associated. People that are interested in those, are interested in insects would be interested in these as well. So we didn't go into any kind of detail in terms of biology or identifying characteristics, but we did show, a number of different common non-insect arthropods in the back that we hope will be helpful for identification.
So Shannon says, not enough bees in your book, but it's still a great guide. So visual and quick to ID. Well, if you want really good bee diversity, you need to go to the mountains. That's where all the really good bee diversity is.
Yeah, we could have certainly added a lot more bees. You're absolutely right, but you know, we have to draw the line somewhere. I think we came in about 15 pages over what our projected was for the press, but they let us get away with that.
Nancy's asking if we have any non-native insects that are likely to be found in our book.
Likely to be found, but not actually found? No.
Well, I think she just wants, do we have non-native insects in our book?
Yes. I mean, there's certainly some introduced species. Yeah. But we did not put any, we did not put like a category of species that maybe would be likely to be like, you know, I'm trying to think of good examples. I mean, the spotted lanternfly that's taking over in the east, you know, could eventually find its way into Texas. And we didn't include anything like that. But certainly common things, I mean, Japanese beetles, for example, or things like that that are introduced and are pretty common, we've included in the book. And then at the end, we wanted to try to include as many additional resources as possible. So again, following that same kind of color coding, we've got, you know, we provided other books, you know, so for example, well, I just am showing one page here, but there'll be a page here that has the Hymenoptera, and there'll be, you know, it'll talk about the bees in your backyard book and the bumblebee book field guide, and it'll point you to other resources for those particular groups, since we can't cover it all. And then a glossary so that, you know, to try to make sure and define any terms that we use throughout, although Kendra was really good about always trying to make sure that we didn't get too technical in our terminology. And we tried to use for this book as, you know, as common a term as possible. But sometimes that's just hard to do.
Yeah, we tried to limit the jargon because I know my students really get frustrated with, you know, and get discouraged quickly if they can't understand what they're reading. So we did try to limit the jargon.
So also Lan mentioned at the beginning that in our introduction that we were working on a Peterson Field Guide to Insects in North America. So some of you may have the original Bohr and White Field Guide from 1970. You know, it's been around for 50 plus years. It's still in print. But in definite need of a revision, taxonomically and otherwise. So we set off on this mission 10 plus years ago, actually, and have been working on it steadily ever since. We're just about to finish it up. It should be finished this year. But it turns out Houghton Mifflin has decided to do away with the Peterson Field Guides. That's what happens when you take so long to get a book out, I guess. At first that gave us a bit of a start because we thought, oh my gosh, we've been working on this for so long. But Princeton University Press, who we already had a relationship with and have worked with before, is going to actually take over the active projects. And it's still unclear whether they're going to adopt the Peterson Field Guide name or whether they're going in that series or whether they'll just be Princeton Natural History Guides.
Yeah, they would have to purchase the Peterson Field Guide series, and but right now the Peterson Field Guide series is dead because they will no longer be printing anymore unless Princeton can buy the rights to the name.
Yeah. But we thought we'd give you just a bit of a preview of what that book will look like. The front cover will be a trifold that folds out, and it'll have a pictorial key to the orders of insects. We have a bunch of different pictorial keys throughout for all the major groups. And so we're hopeful that that will be useful to people. Here's just the kind of somewhat similar in terms of using colors to break down the different groups to what we did in the Texas book, but this is the way it looks in the I guess we'll still call the Peterson Guide or the North American book. The introductory chapters or introductory sections to the chapters look a little bit different. We try to have some standardized categories, of information. So it's very similar no matter what chapter you're flipping to. You'll know what you're looking at and how to quickly find it. Then some additional information along with, one or multiple pages, depending upon the size of the group, of morphological features that you would need to be able to recognize them. Here's another example of a pictorial key, this one for odonates, that will help you, to get to the family level. That is one thing that we did with this book is, so the Texas book is about recognizing common species. This North American book is about recognizing every family of insect in North America. That's what the original Peterson guide did. There's really no other resource out there that does that. While there are other North American insect books like the Kaufman Guide or Art Evans's National Wildlife Guide, we label the species in here, but our goal is really to help you identify every family. So every single family in North America at the time of printing, and I say that because that taxonomy changes all the time, is mentioned in here, not necessarily illustrated. Sometimes, it might be a louse that's only found on bats in a cave in Arizona, and it's unlikely anybody's ever going to run across that, so we're not going to photograph that or take space up in the book for it, but we do mention it and talk about it. And we'll have, wing venation and things like this. We hope this will be a book that will be useful for entomology classes at the college level. And
then the idea is that you get to the family level, and then you'll be able to use something like Bug Guide or iNaturalist to help you get closer to the species level. So, a digital resource to, narrow you down a little bit to get you to another source.
So here's just some other example chapters: roaches, again, the Neuroptera, which I really like. Kendra developed a neat technique for the wing venation, where we would photograph a wing and then she would trace over the veins, and that gives it a realistic look, but also a very, you can really see what vein we are pointing to. And so you'll see wings throughout the book like that. There's just, again, a spread to give you an idea. And then one of the things that we think will be really useful, and this was, again, a brainchild of Kendra's, was to create a illustrated or pictorial glossary. And you, as plant folks, that can probably appreciate this, because you have a great resource, a great pictorial glossary book that is what inspired me to do this. I can't remember the name of that pictorial glossary. It's a yellow paperback. Yeah, but I used it all the time in grad school to try and identify plants, because I did not know all of the jargon, the plant jargon. So hopefully this will be equally as useful to folks for a lot of the insect jargon that is used. And I guess that's it. So we thank you very much for letting us, if I can stop sharing my screen here, letting us share our Texas book with you, and a little bit of a preview of the North American Guide. And if there's time, happy to take some questions. Yeah, so Sue was asking what puts the larva on the oak tree, and the tree grows a ball of wood around the insects. Those are, I'm guessing, oak leaf galls or some sort of gall. It wouldn't be oak leaf gall, but probably, yeah. I mean, they're basically trees forming some kind of, well, I don't know. If it's large, it might not be a gall. It may be just a response by the tree, which is similar to a gall. Because I think I know what you're talking about. I mean, they can be the size of softballs or even footballs, but I'm actually not sure what causes that specifically. But galls in general are formed usually by wasps, lots of other insects, basically just laying their eggs inside leaf tissue or wood. Stems, it could be wasps, beetles, flies. And it's a tissue response by the plant, basically making almost like a tumor around the insect, and then the insect eats it.
Size of a marble.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
well,
that's a gall.
Then that's a gall. All right. I'm thinking about something else. And that is a type of gall that just like what Kendra talked about. It's specifically which one, it's hard to say without seeing it. And that's not my specialty. There are a lot of different
there's a lot of
types of galls out there.
And lots of work to be done on galls, actually.
Yeah.
The last entomology meeting, there was a woman that was talking about how understudied galls are.
Yeah, I mean, maybe you mean so somebody's saying the oak leaf gall wasp. I mean, that forms the golf ball size green apple kind of thing, but wouldn't form one on wood. So I'm not sure, but there are a number of again, insects that will form these galls, and they're actually more recognizable by the gall than they are the insect itself. Usually, the insect itself may not be, you may not see very often, or may not be very recognizable.
Someone is asking if our book is available online, and it is. It's available on Amazon and University of Texas Press website. But it sounds like you should wait and order it for the fundraiser for NIPSOT.
Yes, please. If you're in Houston and you can pick up the book at our pickup, please wait until September.
It's you know, size-wise, somebody's talking about it's a good size to carry in a bag. It's not the smallest of books, but it's also not, you know, some gigantic thing. I mean, it's maybe half the size of like the Sibley Bird Guide, you know, something in terms of its thickness. So, you know, we tried to keep it, you know, keep it as small as possible. What did we end up with? We ended up with about 450 pages. So our pine sawflies, cyclical or yearly. So sawflies tend to be yearly, seasonal, even pine ones, as far as I know and as I remember. We get a ton here in Alabama. We live on a pine mixed hardwood forest, and I get a ton of sawflies, especially early in the year. The larvae are munching away big time then, you know, and then the adults pop out, you see them, but then you basically don't see any activity from them, you know, the rest of the year in many cases anyway.
So someone's asking, why are there taxon changes? Well, it's because we know so little, honestly. And, you know, the original taxonomy was done, you know, with characteristics and information they had at the time. But as we get more species described, and we're able to use like genetic tools as well as morphological tools, we're able to actually tell what things are related to one another. And sometimes we're super surprised and we've completely gotten it wrong. And then there's big changes. And sometimes it's just a species changes to another species.
So the names themselves, you know, the idea is that they indicate a relationship. You know, you have families of genera with species in them, and it's hierarchical and showing relationships. And sometimes our understanding of those relationships changes, especially with new technologies like DNA, being able to look at DNA, where something may look similar morphologically, we may find out they're not similar at all in reality by looking at the genes. And so all of those things, plus just more and more people looking at them, mean that, you know, there's that's an entire field with lots and lots of scientists that are basically constantly not just describing new species, but changing our understanding of the relationships of those species.
Are there any more questions? If not, thank you two very much for such a interesting and comprehensive overview of the insect world. So it's really fantastic.
Well, thank you again for the invitation, and I hope that you all find the book useful.
Yes.
I'm sure we will. And also, I'm glad to have you come and talk to us, because you were supposed to come several years ago, 2017, I think,
Yes.
and Harvey hit. So
Yeah.
we've been trying to get you ever since. So I'm glad we were able to get you this time.
Me
Thank
too.
you again.
I'm glad to speak with the group. Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
All right. Everybody
Okay.
have a good evening.
Bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Well, good night, everyone. Thank you for coming.
Good to see you, Lan.
Oh, hi, Don and Penny. Yeah, I did look and found that you were attending.
Thank you,
I
Lan.
was wondering about that. So how are you doing?
We're doing fine. How about
Great.
you?
We're doing fine too.
Mama's all right?
Yep. She's still going great guns.
That's wonderful.
And actually, maybe I'll give you a call sometimes because I've been to a restaurant recently, so maybe we can meet again.
Oh, yes,
yeah.
yes. We missed talking with you. It would be something to see you again.
Not the smash hamburger place.
Oh, okay.
Thanks for the invitation to this meeting.
Yeah.
Well, it's right up your alley.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we do hope to talk to you on the phone soon.
Yep.
Are you
Good
still
night.
at the museum?
What? Actually, my mother and I are volunteering at the 9 Natives Garden the whole time. Well, since last July for a year now. So that's outside and not inside, and so that's what we've been doing. Not
Warmer
every week,
out there.
twice a week, twice a month. Weeding mostly.
Oh, we could give you some experience in our garden.
No, my mother said we need to volunteer in our garden.
Good seeing you and talking to you.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Same here.